Singaporean companies are expanding fast across the region, and HR is leading the charge. With 85% now hiring regionally, HR teams are key to managing compliance and workforce strategy. Joining us are Alvin Aloysius Go from the Singapore Human Resources Institute, Kelvin Tan from Drew and Napier, and Mark Samlal from Deel. Now let's begin with some context. What's behind the surge in regional hiring among Singaporean firms?
As far as Singapore companies are concerned, the Singapore government has long encouraged homegrown firms to expand globally, and that regional expansion also contributes to that increase in hiring. But these demand factors come up against the limitations of the Singapore labor market. We have a full employment labor market in Singapore, and many of the companies that are ramping up are in areas where we need candidates in specific fields and discipline, for example, in AI. And that means that companies do need to look beyond Singapore to hire for those particular skill sets. The pandemic was also a watershed for remote work, and the ease with which companies can manage employees across borders means that companies in Singapore also more easily access global talent with less cost and effort.
I think that everything that was said is absolutely correct, and the absolute talent drive for organisations to prosper within regional and global frameworks from Singapore is key. Talent is everywhere, and the ability to have the right person on the right job for your organisation doesn't necessarily have to be dictated by borders. So that's definitely the outcome of COVID, it was mentioned. But most importantly, making sure that you have the right talent for your business at that particular scaling time.
I think regional growth has business dynamics has actually, motivated lots of Singapore companies to expand beyond the shores of Singapore, especially from a business expansion standpoint. Firms are no longer just serving local markets here in Singapore. I think they are building customer bases around the region, especially in Southeast Asia, and partnerships across ASEAN as well, such as countries like in India, China, and also as well as the Middle East. I think the other catalyst that is motivating a lot of companies to expand overseas is also the remote work infrastructure and borderless tech tools that have empowered businesses to build, teams where markets are rather than where HQ is.
But what's exactly hindering progress? What compliance hurdles do Singapore firms face when hiring across Asia?
Your core competency in your own business typically isn't labour laws and HR compliance across the region. Your core competency typically is the widget with which you're delivering to your customers. So as a result of that, being able to be assured, however you scale, that you have the right processes, technology, and people in place to make sure that your business profit and absolutely survives the nuances of a new market is clear. We obviously founded a company here in Singapore ourselves. I was able to scale that into 14 different markets over a 7-year period before being acquired by Deel. And as a founder, I traversed all of those challenges myself, and most importantly, was able to assure my colleagues within our business framework that our talent was on time, paid compliantly, so they would be able to assure our clients that they would get the same reward and recognition by working with us.
When companies move offshore, we'll find that each country within the region has its own laws, its own requirements, its own cultural, social makeup, which makes the complexity of going to another country to hire that much more tricky for someone who is uninitiated. And then, of course, people also think of remote work as being an easy solution because you have someone who remains in their country and does work for you, but that comes with its own challenges. You need to see whether the host country allows people to work remotely for someone in a foreign land. For example, Indonesia has a remote worker visa, which allows foreigners to work remotely for a period of up to 1 year. And, different countries have different schemes like that. You also have the need to consider whether if you put someone in a foreign country, you will end up with having a permanent establishment in that country. That can be a very alarming thing, because once you have a permanent establishment in that foreign country, suddenly you have tax and other compliance obligations in those countries which you didn't set out to have. So there are these issues when it comes to remote work. It's not as easy or as attractive sometimes as it seems.
So given everything that you've mentioned earlier, what risks should companies consider when scaling HR regionally?
Some companies think that they get around having to have a local presence by having an employer of record. An employer of record is a company in a foreign country that performs the legal responsibilities of hiring employees in that country. And there's an arrangement that they hire the employees, but the work that the employees do is actually for the client company. In theory, that sounds all very well. That isn't going to sit with the laws of every country. For example, in Singapore, you have a situation where our work passes only allow the foreign employees to work for the company that obtained the work pass. So you can't have an employer of record. There is also the risk when you scale overseas of inconsistent employee treatment across different countries. There needs to be a sensitivity to how they adapt their policies, their ways of working to those countries, because if you don't do that, then there's a danger of affecting your employer branding. And, in a tight labor situation, particularly for high-tech AI type industries where there's only a finite number of people you're looking at, the employer branding is going to be a very important thing as you scale up.
I think the key consideration to scaling and understanding where your talent's going to be is clear. If you have the ability to look at that and understand how AI tools within your choice of organization with which to scale will help you, that's certainly one thing that in today's environment, post-COVID, and certainly in the last year, AI tools are helping founders scale with information ahead of time, making items such as HR practices a lot more straightforward and simpler. But I think the most important thing is go with where your market is desiring you to go. Make sure that you focus on that, and make sure that you don't put your company's reputation, as mentioned, under jeopardy by fouling your HR practices and policies and hiring practices and policies, because some near countries to us here in Singapore will look very unfavorably upon that, and you'll lose your license to operate. So act with great caution and make sure that you start yourself correctly at the beginning of your journey.
For HR professionals, some of the key areas that they must be fully aware is, one of the cultural issues itself, right? The local practices, and as well as some of the different leadership styles that their business leaders and themselves must also enact. I think these are the 3 key points that they must be fully aware before actually venturing into a different country in terms of their operations.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Alvin, Kelvin, and Mark.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Once again, those were Alvin Aloysius Goh, Chief Executive Officer at Singapore Human Resources Institute, Kelvin Can, Director for Dispute Resolution at Drew & Napier LLC, and Mark Samlal, General Manager for Asia Pacific at Deel. For more news, visit sbr.com.sg.